Chapter 51. Black Spear, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 51. Black Spear, 2, the other trolls and orcs of the Black Spear clan were quite pleasant. I had initially thought the situation wasn't that good after seeing them rear humans, but they had brought us a variety of food and even alcohol, one that even the Green Goblin clan had. Maybe they were made from the seeds in the forest, but I couldn't help but think if there was a racial characteristic that allowed trolls to make delicious alcohol. Although it wasn't the same wine I drank with the Grand Patriarch, this one was similarly sweet, and was sufficient enough to generate warmth in the belly. But why did you come here, Blood Dagger? While our subordinates were having fun with one another, Black Spear broached the subject. In fact, I have a matter to take care of near the desert. Karuk, I see. He looked very curious. I thought the information wasn't as grand to the greenskins, so I decided to change the subject and try to avoid his curiosity that way. Karuk. Actually, the god of battlefield spoke to me. He revealed the location of a mysterious weapon. I do not know exactly, but I feel I have to go to that location. The god of battlefield. How interesting. As expected, once I mentioned the god of battlefield, all the previous suspicions disappeared. He did not ask another question, nor did he ask for anything else. Instead, his expression looked bitter. It seems that it had been a long while since he received a quest. Since he was not looking so good, I asked. It seems that you have some worries, Black Spear. From my question, after briefly pondering, he replied. That is so, Blood Dagger. Since it has come to this, lend me your wisdom. In fact, I have also heard the voice of the god of battlefield. To be precise, it has been 3 months. It told me to hunt humans and beasts. Sounded like quite a simple quest. But seeing how he still hadn't resolved this quest, it seems that either the number that he had to kill was too many, or there was a reason that didn't allow him to complete the quest. Though it was rude to ask for another person's quest details according to human morals, greenskins probably wouldn't think so, I thought at least to ask. May I check the contents from the god of battlefield's voice? Of course. Quest, to survive. You must hunt humans and beasts to survive. Continue hunting humans and beasts of the small western city Legius. 0/1, I have hunted countless humans and beasts, but I cannot figure out what the god of battlefield requires of me. From the period that I had heard the voice, the number of humans leaving the human city had begun to shrink. And the humans we have, are those that we barely managed to capture. In trying to complete the voice from the god of battlefield, it has come to a situation where all my subordinates are too full to eat. Though I pretended to think, there was one thing that came to mind when I saw the quest details. The quest title was meaningful in itself. To hunt to survive means that there was only one reason. Food. The humans of the small town had shrunk in number. The culprit to that would be our Blood Dagger clan. It is not certain, but the humans that lived in Legius probably moved to the larger city AIA to supplement the main force when we had attacked them. Especially, the death of Li Yongdan was critical. With a large clan disappearing in the large city, there would be clans in Legius that saw this as an opportunity to play with the big fish and move to AIA. To be exact, they have suffered from the butterfly effect due to our actions. Although there are evil beasts that live here, there are no grand figures. For the Black Spear clan that had relied on the humans for their source of food the majority of the time, humans were now beginning to dwindle. I began to look for breakthroughs, and as a chief, I felt a sense of responsibility from the revelation of Black Spear's quest. Well. Do you know a way, Blood Dagger? It was a ridiculous situation. In conclusion, we have to increase the population of Legius in order to complete Black Spear's quest. A problem that would decide the survival of the whole clan. After roughly organizing my thoughts, I replied. I think it is better to stop hunting humans for the time being. What are you talking about, Blood Dagger. We must fatten the village of the humans. No matter how much you hunt the humans, the god of battlefield won't reply back to you. Ah! The others would not have understood, but Black Spear indeed realized. Come to think of it, with how grand the welcoming was, it seems that he was intent on asking for advice from the start. Since he had heard that we had perfectly passed the warrior's exam, they had already made preparations in the first place. I understand what you're talking about, Blood Dagger. Thank you. Thanks. I nodded to his words, but it seems that he hasn't reached a fundamental solution. If monsters outside the town become quiet, perhaps people will flock to the town, but those people have a tendency of not leaving the city in the first place. In order to obtain food and battle that the Black Spear clan desires, we had to have high-level guys that go on campaigns all the time to migrate over here. In fact, there was a way to completely solve his worries. But the problem was, in order to solve his problem, I had to give up the quest I currently had. If these adventurers clear Ancient Warrior's grave and announce it, then others will come hoping that there are other dungeons or nice items lying in wait. In anticipation, countless intermediate and advanced summoned will flock over here, and the Black Spear clan will be able to scream in joy. It is obvious that with a large population, the city will supply the Black Spear clan with food and battles. I had no choice but to ponder the outcomes. Whether to complete my quest, or help Black Spear. Not sure if he knew what I was thinking, but it seemed that he was full of thoughts on fattening the human villages, and as such the welcoming feast had come to an end, and morning was about to arrive. I pondered for a long time, but I decided to go to the dungeon. After the sun was dazzlingly bright, I began to lead my clan members outside the village. Of course we brought a huge amount of food, since we were planning to wait on standby outside the dungeon for a few days. I knew beforehand that adventurers from that town would discover the dungeon roughly at this period, but because of the possibility that my memory was wrong, or that they announced a false statement, I arrived there in advance from the original expected discovery and waited. As we walked, one continued to scream. Whoa! I will protect Blood Dagger by his side. Gark, who looked as if he was so ecstatic to be here instead of his younger brother, walked beside me on my left. Mev frowned at the noise, but Gark, who was already enthused to be hunting together with me, continued jumping around. In the end, the three goblin siblings were unable to bear it, as they began to try and to calm Gark down. Be quiet. Girik, Girik. You're too noisy. Girik. 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 They were annoyed at having to listen to the whoa noises. In the end, I spoke to Gark. For this operation, we must act stealthily. Ah. Understood, Captain. His face turned pale, as if he was afraid I would send him back and call for his brother. To be honest, there was no real reason to be quiet, but this was the best excuse. As expected, there were no humans nearby. It seems that the activity around here has definitely decreased. Our clan continued to march as one, as I worried that the party originally set to clear Ancient Warrior's grave might leave for the city of Haia, instead to compete against the Holy Order. After walking for some time, a desert began to soon appear. Firstly, we had to find the dungeon from my memories to begin with, so that we can start to build a small camp at a suitable place. After hiding at an acceptable position, we began to wait for the hidden dungeon to reveal itself. Then, after about half a day, the wind began to blow. Swing. Sand began to shift away along with the sound. Below, there was a faint visible stone. Since it was so far, if I didn't know of the existence of such a dungeon, I might have just passed by. After commanding the clan to stand by, I ran towards the place and began to confirm the surrounding floor. After lightly pounding the greatsword onto the ground, I didn't hear the smashing of the sand. Instead, I heard the banging of stones. Rumble. Rumble. The sound continued to resonate. Kuriak. After hurriedly digging the ground, soon I was able to see it better. It was truly the ancient warrior's grave. After confirming, I returned back to the camp, where MeV was waiting. "Captain, did you find something?" "That's right." Seeing that I was pleased, Young Hae-yeon and the rest began to laugh. Exactly 6 days later, the targets began to show their faces. The whole party was configured of advanced and intermediates. Just in case they might have an extremely keen archer, we stopped our breathing as we monitored them. A distance where we could only confirm their equipment and gender. 16 males and 6 females. I had heard that there were 20 that had entered, but it seems that the information was a bit different. Seeing that the baggage was simple, it seems that they were not entering today. To check how many days it will take, and how dangerous the dungeon will be, it seems that they were carefully examining it seriously. Soon, the magician of their party began to chant a spell. Feeling the large mana, soon the wind collided against the place. The scale was more than I had imagined. Kwa-a-a-a-wea. The sound of tearing from the wind was so large that it was heard all the way to this remote place. Fuck. I was very surprised seeing such a high-level magician. Despite knowing that we were going to PK them, I began to worry whether or not we can handle such a monster. But, among all of them, only 5 barely survived from the dungeon. If we fit our timing well, everything should transpire as I had planned. I attempted to nod. While I was thinking, a female with a robe raised her hands in the eyes, and gradually, the ancient warrior's grave began to completely reveal itself. It looked like an entrance to the basement. Statue-like warriors in the entrance were welcoming them. Despite being just blocks of stone, their weapons looked quite nice, so my heart pounded a little. And a man that looked like the party leader extended his hand. Slowly, the entrance of the dungeon opened. As if it hasn't been opened in a long time, faint grinding sounds were heard over here. All of the 22 party members were absent-mindedly staring on at the ancient warrior's grave. Perhaps they wanted to see their achievements as a whole. There were 20 people that had equipment on, and 2 females among them. Their equipment was mediocre, and they didn't even possess a weapon. Extremely nervous, they began to look around anxiously. Porter. There were rumors that advanced and higher-level parties would normally bring porters, but it seems it was really true. It only sounded nice, porter that is. In fact, it was the modern slave. Other than fighting where they would support the summoned a bit, it was a helping job. Preparing food, preparing equipment, and even relieving the lust of the adventurers that weren't able to leave the dungeon, they were entrusted to all of this. So it was natural that the treatment towards the porters were bad. By continuing to accompany them in dungeons, they may think that there might be a way to climb up, but I had never heard of a porter that had actually did that. Of course, there were more cases where they are forced to enter against their own will. In the dungeon, they are treated less than humans. Really close to slavery. Funny enough, as I watched on, a method of completing my quest, as well as helping Black Spear began to emerge. Chapter 52. Entry 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 52. Entry 1, I quietly approached the first and spoke. Tell Black Spear I have proposition to discuss with him, Gark. Gark nodded and soon disappeared from the spot. Since he can hide his body, he was perfect for these kinds of tasks. Though it hasn't been long since Black Spear had been independent, from what I can feel, he was definitely between intermediate and advanced. He was definitely stronger than me. If he consents to my proposal, then handling these guys that are currently in the dungeon entrance will become simpler. Ancient Warrior's Tomb. Just like how I had confirmed from the logbook. It was a dungeon consisting of the undead. The main difference was that unlike other dungeons, the interior was very clean. Unlike the ghouls, zombies and skeletons in this tomb are quite common. The weapons that they use are, of course, of superior quality. I'm not sure if they wanted to hide the functions of the items they acquired, but there were no information concerning the items. At most, only one item was announced. Covenant Ring. An accessory type that had mana +2. It consists of two functions, the other which has the ability to send and receive communication from afar, which was amazing. A 1.of.a. kind item. It was one of the many items that I previously investigated to take a look, but it was definitely the most memorable item. Anyhow, I held my breath and continued to monitor them. A total of 22 people. The majority of them were of warrior and thief types and 2 archers, while the females looked like they were either priests or magicians. And there were 2 porters. To clear a dungeon, it was a well-balanced, decent enough party. Not sure which one of them had discovered the dungeon, but it seems that the clan came for the expedition as a whole. Or a gathering of people by contacting everyone that they knew well. Of course the latter would be more advantageous for us. Soon, the party began to enter the dungeon. Seeing that, Mevi spoke. "Captain, they're heading in. If we wait a little, they will come out." "Really?" She was a bit suspicious, but since my voice was full of confidence, she didn't ask further. Mevi just nodded. Like I had said, after half a day, the party, one by one, began to leave the dungeon, as Mevi looked at me full of awe and veneration. Thanks to that, my pride heightened. "How did you know?" "Since the amount of belongings and food seemed small. I assumed that they were intending on just having a rough tour of the place." "Captain, you're too great." Mevi's eyes were sparkling. As much as how Green Goblin gazes at his gold, she was staring at me. I became a bit uncomfortable. At this rate, she might ask to mate with me. I quickly turned around. The party gradually started to leave. Not sure what number this preliminary investigation was, but I couldn't help but feel that they will soon enter, seeing the atmosphere. Not precise, but within a week. They will launch a signal up once they enter to clear the dungeon, I think. The distance between them and us was somewhat far now, so I patted the shoulders of the still anxious Blood Dagger clan as we returned back to the camp. Kong Hannah, it had been exactly 2 years since she was summoned to the continent. Although she traveled here and there, she still hadn't awakened her unique ability. And so, she was not able to escape the level of a beginner. Although she had ventured out with the intent of growing stronger, reality was cold and unforgiving after 2 years. Since then, it was hard to eat and survive. She had selected the job of a porter. She had decided to grow by choosing to enter any clan. Fortunately, one clan noticed her and proposed whether or not if she were to be their porter, so she promptly accepted. Although she wasn't sure what kind of tasks porters do, but she had thought it was a better selection than becoming a prostitute. That's what she had thought before entering the dungeon with the Overlord clan. Fuck. Originally, her words and inner personality wasn't so foul. If she had known that these people would treat her lower than the standards of a pig. No, if she knew that porters were hired to be tools for relieving their sexual needs, she wouldn't have accepted the proposition in the first place. It wasn't like she didn't earn points at all when entering a dungeon, but since she couldn't directly participate in the battles, the amount that she earned was minimum at best. And the fact that the points and gold she earned were all spent on potions and other consumables. It wasn't like they were willing to follow their initial promise of raising her in the first place. When she had first entered the dungeon, she nearly died. The superior healing potion that she had consumed was still left as a debt to be paid till this very day. What she thought of porters was ant hell. Since she was bound by the contract, she could not escape, and even if she could, these beasts would not let her do so. Not sure when things had gone wrong, but she was in a miserable situation. So she began to walk with the party while carrying a bag full of miscellaneous items. It was then that someone had slapped her butt. At that time, she couldn't help but feel violated. But, she had no choice but to bite her lips and endure. She thought the harassment would soon end, but after touching her all over, the man began to speak, causing Hannah to bite her lips once again. "Are you expecting it tonight? Fucking bastard." Even by ripping you apart, I won't be at ease. If this was Earth, it was proper to slap him in this situation, but against that overwhelming strength, she couldn't do anything. It wasn't like she didn't resist in the past. She had fired back against them. There was a time where she had resisted like life and death depended on it. Every time, what she received was overwhelming violence. Whenever she remembered that time, her legs would tremble subconsciously. Eventually, she closed her eyes tight and spoke. Yes. Yes. Of course. Attaining a special class, he was Jang Young-soo, who was reigning as one of the strong and Legious. The same bastard that persuaded her to sign a contract to be a porter. There were others including Jang Young-soo that treated her like a prostitute. To be precise, they were all beasts. There were none that didn't covet her. Of course, the worst among all of them was the magician Kim Mina. Not sure why, but she was the one that always treated her the worst. It spoke volumes that she would overlook and tolerate the crimes that transpired inside the clan. This woman, that looked down on her. No, there were no crimes in this place to begin with. Whether it was Kong Hana, Becca Hyen or herself, they were merely items that the clan possessed. Even though they were simply returning back to the city, the road back was not so smooth. This fucking bitch. It seems that Kim Mina had erupted. The reason was that they were not properly managing her possessions. It was impossible to organize and carry 20 people's worth of possessions in a short amount of time. But, it seems that this didn't matter to them. What was important was that it was a mistake. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The only person here that she could call a friend was her fellow porter, Becca Hyen. Seeing her bow her head down, Hannah couldn't help but turn her head away. This fucking bitch. Is being sorry all? Do you even know how much that's worth? Slap. Slap. The slaps echoed, but none of them were willing to calm her down. Hannah slightly raised her head and began to witness this scene. She definitely knew that the expensive items in there weren't damaged. It was probably the fact that there were dust or scratches on the items, why she was in such a rage. The sight of Mina slapping a Hyen entered her view. This slapping was to simply alleviate her anger, she thought. As if she was slapping her with infused mana, every time a Hyen's face turned, blood spurted out from her mouth. Fucking bitch. Dirty bitch. Appa. Can't I just kill this bitch already? Mina, endure. She's a bit clumsy originally. As long as we work as one, you won't be beat like that. Isn't that so? Yes. Yes, though she replied, Becca Hyen was probably worried. That cute face accompanied by her short height had instantly become ragged with blood, as blood stains covered her clothes. I'm sorry. Sniff. So. I'm sorry. 4. Forgive me, please. Do you know how many times this has been? Fuck. Fuck. Phew. I really want to kill you. Truly, a Hyen who was full of bruises was standing in front of Mina, who was gradually raising her mana. Of course, a Hyen trembled from the sight, and it was then that Jang Young-soo spoke. Mina. You know you can't really kill her. That thing is also part of the clan wealth. Hannah, seeing that the woman was slowly reducing her mana, was able to calm herself down. Complaining, she mumbled as she retorted back. Clan's wealth. For a bitch that's not even worth that much. TCH, alright. Hey. Fuck off. Yes. Yes, thank you. Due to her bloodied mouth, it was extremely difficult to speak back from the looks of it. It would be nice if the clan's priest would treat her. Those fucking bastards thought for her, it was a bit better as she had forged a contract with them, but for a Hyen who was sold to them due to a debt was truly treated like a pig. In the end, Hannah couldn't help but stare furtively at Jang Young-soo. She didn't want to be inclined to him, but she had to request this dirty bastard to treat a Hyen. Just by staring, Jang Youngsu understood her intent and soon called the clan's priest who began treating a Haiyan. You owe me a debt today. All right. Yes. Yes. Thank you. He'll probably demand for more than the norm today as Hannah quickly moved towards a Haiyan. Even though the clan master Jang Youngsu had asked to treat her, it seems that the priest just roughly patched her up. There were still wounds on her face, so she couldn't help but assume that. Uni. I'm sorry. No. No, it's all right. Hannah with a Haiyan in her embrace continued walking the road, and when it felt like their stamina had reached the limit, they were able to enter the city. Since everyone was quite tense and sharp due to the dungeon, it was harder than usual. There was only her left to take care of a Haiyan as Hannah nodded to herself. Chapter 53. Entry 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 53. Entry 2, after they had left, I decided to return to the recently established camp and wait for Black Spear. Gark had arrived first and informed me that Black Spear would directly follow. Koreak. Black Spear will come here, Captain. Well done, Gark. I had slightly raised my hand to him, causing him to pound his chest in salute. For Blood Dagger. I responded to his action with a nod, and after a day had passed, I was able to see Black Spear arrive. As if he couldn't withdraw his forces from his village, he had only brought 2 other trolls. Since his subordinates had to go out in search for evil beasts for rations, I couldn't help but think that it was a shame. Power, wisdom and honor. Power, wisdom and honor. I had roughly heard of the gist of it from the brave orc warrior Gark, Blood Dagger. I had worried a bit if he could properly do the job, but it seems that Gark had properly transmitted the message. It seems that he was NA.VE, but not stupid. Is it true that you can truly solve the problem that the Black Spear clan has? His expression told me that he had a lot of questions. Of course, he couldn't help but be curious. So, I answered firmly. That is so, Black Spear. Just until a few days ago, definitely. I remember hearing from you that we had to fatten the village of the humans. I'm shocked. Koreak. Black Spear. How do you fatten a giant wolf? Needs to be fed. It is the same for the village of humans. We can simply fatten the village of humans. It was a simple answer, but despite that, it seems that he had realized something. It was really similar to what MEV would do when staring back at me. If I have to say it, full of admiration. You are truly wise, Blood Dagger. However, how can we fatten the human village? I will slowly explain that to you. So what will you do? Won't you hunt together with me temporarily? In truth, there was no need to think about it. It was too big a temptation in itself to return the declining town numbers back to the original days. If I were in his shoes, I would definitely have accepted this offer as well. Even this guy who was staring at me full of respect will definitely accept. As expected, he nodded. I will accept, Blood Dagger. In you, I believe. Bingo, what I could notice in his expression was trust. Soon, he sent one of the trolls back, probably to take responsibility of the state of affairs in the village. I had really attained a powerful ally. His power was higher than I had thought. I was initially worried, but it seems I don't have to be. As such, Black Spear and I joined forces, and 5 days flowed by. After having my eyes closed for some time, MEV came to wake me up. Captain. Captain. Koreak. Suddenly waking up, I could feel MEV's face right next to mine. So they have come. That's right. The humans have returned. As Captain had stated, this time, the bags are larger. 2 human females were carrying large bags. It seems that MEV was referring to the porters. Quickly coming out, I was able to see Black Spear gradually leave his residence as well. All the other subordinates including the first were waiting on standby for orders. Looking on, I slowly spoke. After the humans have entered, we will go in. Karuk. They nodded without saying anything. Like the previous time, the magician called for a large wind as he began chanting a spell. Soon, the sand of the desert was cleared, and the ancient warrior's tomb appeared once again. From the logbook, it took about 10 days for them to clear it. As large as the dungeon was, the bags that the porters were carrying looked even heavier. It wouldn't have mattered if a strong warrior were to carry them, but to entrust this matter to these porters, these guys definitely had no sense of privilege. It wasn't strange by any chance. For a human without ability in the world, after entering this realm would definitely yearn to gain power and be rewarded accordingly. The effort and work they invest in becoming stronger, these achievements that none of the world had recognized them for, they wanted their lives to be rewarded with slaves and porters. I looked at Black Spear. His eyes were reddened, knowing the level of strength that the humans possessed, as his combative spirit flared. However, in this hunt, what was more important than combative spirit was patience. I looked at Black Spear and reminded him. Black Spear. I know that you are not inclined, but I hope that you can follow me for this hunt. Of course, Blood Dagger. As someone with a debt of gratitude, I am not in the position to act as I please. Thank you, Black Spear. Although I was also the same with a debt of gratitude, it was a relief to hear him say that, as we watched the humans enter the dungeon. The disappointing part was that they had covered the dungeon with sand after entering. It seems that they were intent on not letting anyone know the location of this dungeon. As such, after about 3 hours later, the Blood Dagger and Black Spear clans slowly began to move. Is this really how we can fatten the village of the humans? That is so, Black Spear. Just like how many green skins gather around strong opponents, humans also cling themselves to these kinds of places. I see. It seems that he had lacked faith while waiting. After everything is over, he will send me off in applause, so I decided to not necessarily talk about it. So we slowly approached the entrance and began digging the sand out. It was a shame that we didn't have anything shovel-like, but thanks to the Haynes plants, we were able to clear away the sand in a fairly quick time. The stone statues of the large two warriors was indeed impressive. I had lived 10 years in this continent, but despite that, it was a first to see such a grand dungeon entrance as this. If I were to have discovered this dungeon at the time, I probably would have been satisfied with selling this information and retrieving my gold coins, but for this dungeon to be wholly in front of me, it felt somewhat anew. Then, let's enter. Karuk, for Blood Dagger. Victory. For victory only. Of course, since the battle wasn't power versus power, the response wasn't as passionate as usual. But the desire in their eyes were real. We began to slowly enter the dungeon. Immediately after entering the dungeon, the smell of danger lingered. Even though the undead were not cleaned up yet, but for them to emit such a smell, it was definitely a dangerous dungeon. Black Spear continued to nod in consent. Indeed. I understand why they are fond of these kinds of places, Blood Dagger. A true warrior would never hate these kinds of places. To be honest, what the humans want were the treasures rather than this kind of atmosphere, but it was more convenient to let him have this misunderstanding. Good. It was not only him that felt good. The rest of the subordinates were smiling pleasantly after smelling the danger that surrounded them. Do not forget our objective. Girik. Girik. For Blood Dagger. After reminding them once more, I began to look at Mev. In this operation, the most important figure was Mev, an archer that could read tracks. Since I had already told her in advance, Mev was already investigating the vicinity. Enve, it was cleaner than I had thought, but there were still bugs and spider webs here and there. Maybe it was because the place was a basement, but I could feel some dampness in the air. In my eyes, I could only see these kinds of things, but it would definitely differ from what Mev can notice. Fortunately, I don't think the tracks were erased. It seems that there would be no problems since they had blocked off the entrance. Thanks to that, it will be a bit more comfortable for me. Nice. Koreak. Over here. It seems that it has been some time since they had left this place. You can relax a bit. How far do you think they are from us? I'm not exactly sure. But I am confident that they are a bit far away. Good job. It seems that it was impossible for MEV to calculate the precise distance. If she were to advance to an intermediate or advanced archer from Fairy Sprite Archer, she would be able to read them more precisely, but I was sufficiently thankful already to her guiding us. We began to move. They prioritized safety over everything else in this dungeon clear, it seems, as they rested along the way. So, we also did the same as we continued unraveling their tracks. And finally, we were able to discover traces of the first battle. There was undead that were wearing high-quality patterned armors. The problem was that the armors were all damaged and dented as if from an intense battle that had transpired here. There was even an armor that was cut in half. If they were wearing dark armor, it would probably be alright to call them Dark Knights. Seeing the wounds and blood on the walls, it explained that the battle was definitely not simple at all. But, there were no casualties in this battle. I was not at the level of MEV, but I too could read these kinds of traces. This head was not cut off by a sword. These undead were not cut by a sword. It's magic, right? But the opinion of an expert was more important. Waiting for MEV to speak, I could hear her distinctive bright voice soon. Yup. They were cut very sharply. If it was a very high-level swordsman, they could do this much, but seeing the traces of mana left behind here, it definitely seems. It was definitely the high-class magician that I initially saw. It seems that after the warriors had blocked the vanguard as much as possible, the wind-type magician had finished the mass up in an instant. Seeing the faint footprints of the undead, I could notice that the undead did not approach him. He believes in his party members. Not only that. Seeing a few undead with arrows that penetrated their armor, it seems that their archers were also above normal level. Pulling out an arrow, I could feel the faint mana exuding from the tip. The archers seemed to be strong. MEV also nodded. I immediately called Black Spear towards my side. If we were to battle them, this magician was definitely the #1 priority. The first target that Black Spear needs to handle. If even Black Spear was not enough, then I will have the first also target him with his recently attained Windwalk unique ability. The leader looked to be quite strong as well, but these traces couldn't help but warn us to be cautious of the magician. Black Spear. This human magician is yours. I can't wait. As if he was really expecting this, his face brightened as he nodded. If the magician does survive after they kill the dungeon boss, then he would definitely not be able to avoid Black Spear's javelin. As such, MEV and I analyzed these traces for quite a while. Then I could feel the presence of humans. Strength immediately entered the bodies of the subordinates and Black Spear. I, too, withdrew my great sword. I was extremely worried whether they had noticed us trailing them. Damn. Chapter 54. Porter, 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 54. Porter, 1, the distance between us were not so close. But the problem was that if we could notice them, then indeed, they would in turn notice us. If one of them was an archer like MEV, the possibility of them noticing us was very high. I quietly raised my hand, and soon absolute stillness soon entered the group. We had to hide our presence as much as possible. Everyone I had brought specialized in killing their presences, as all of them began to hide in their own disposition. With a slightly worried face, I looked at Black Spear, and he too began to kill his breathing. He hadn't trained for it personally, but it seems that at least he knows basic stealth. Since it was a very quiet dungeon, soon voices began to resound through the passage. There were 2 sounds of footsteps. Although we weren't able to determine who they were, but listening to the shaking armor, thankfully it wasn't an archer. Perhaps a warrior. He. The voice of a person laughing like an idiot began to resonate. MEV had definitely said that they were quite far away, so it seems highly likely that they had separated from the main group to investigate the area. But, this task is usually assigned to an archer, so I began to wonder why a warrior had appeared. But, that curiosity soon disappeared. At first, nothing could be heard, but as time went by, the moaning and groaning of a woman had largely filled the dungeon. Not sure if that was fortunate or not, but it seems that the man was wholly focused on the woman. It's definite that the person that accompanied him was a porter. Crazy bastard. Ab. EUB. Ak. Ak. Phew. Be quiet. The only thing that we could hear was guttural. Although I had expected it, porters were really treated less than a human, even causing me to be a bit bitter as well. It was because I had remembered the time between Choi Solji and I. Even after we had killed our presence, we continued to hear their voices. However, after some time had passed, the screams slowly began to drift away. TCH. No matter how much the path in the dungeon was one way, for him to be this far apart from the group and committing this kind of act, I couldn't help but think that the nerves of this guy was great. Maybe he assumed that there was not much danger since they had already traversed this path. Or rather he was confident in his ability. Anyhow, seeing that, I was able to obtain some more information. I wasn't sure up to where they had reached, but it seems that they were resting after a battle. They were probably regenerating their mana while having supper. And this guy, unable to endure his sexual desire, dragged the porter out. When I was a human, there was always that kind of guy. The type of bastards that look for the opposite sex after a battle. The fear and excitement of near death would rather increase sexual desire. As they gradually went away, we too began to withdraw. The guy could be sensitive after finishing and might confirm our location. However, thankfully that kind of event did not happen. MEV now stared at me nodding that she could not feel their presence any longer, allowing me to slightly lower my hand. The anxiety of the party had started to ease. So after we continued to wait in the dungeon, a bit later, MEV spoke. Mating is done so quick between them. Are mating among humans always this fast? Not sure what kind of response she anticipated, but I did not bother tackling the question. It was definitely short, but it was that thought had never crossed my mind. But seeing the goblins lower their heads from MEV's remark, it seems that there were a few of them that were on the level of that human. Fortunately, I was relieved that I was not among them, but due to that, I thought it was best to rest today. We are going to rest here today. Understood. Girick. Alright, Blood Dagger. We did not put up tents, as if they should suddenly return, then we would have to quickly withdraw them. After quietly finishing our meal, after some time, silence filled the dungeon. Of course, we had decided on having a night watch. Just like when we had traveled to the north, I signaled for the trembling Heian, who quickly clung onto me after thanking me. She kept wrapping her thighs around my thing as if she wanted to arouse it, but we could never do it. She herself knew that she shouldn't be doing this, but it seems that it was hard for her to contain her lust. In the end, I resolved this situation by having Heian and MEV together. MEV with a drowsy expression and Heian being embarrassed. I knew that the relationship between the two wasn't so good, but it was quite amusing to see. If it wasn't the captain's order, she certainly would have rejected my offer. Ha! Be honored. Because of Captain, I'm doing this. Yes. Thank you very much. After a while, seeing the two closely together with one another, a smile subconsciously appeared on my face. As such, the night passed in the dungeon. Hey, was there anything unusual? No, you think there was? Just in case, I swept away everything from the start. Hannah, hearing a voice from somewhere, slowly turned her head. The clan was having supper. She was worried for Ahian who had suddenly been taken away by a warrior. Hannah was a warrior, and Ahian was a summoned that wished to be a magician. As someone that could only simply call for water and raise a fire, preparing dinner was much more difficult, but what Hannah was more focused on was her safety. Thankfully, it seemed like nothing serious had happened. She held her chest in relief. Even though she knew that after all the tents were set up, he would come bother Ahian, but for him to directly take her out like that, his thing in the middle must be truly large. She quietly moved towards Ahian to check on her. Are you okay? Yes. Uni, nothing much happened. Hee. It seems to be a relief, seems to be fine. But seeing the emotionless Ahian, Hannah couldn't help but bite her lips. It was because they did not want to admit that they were being raped by this group. She quickly thought about something else, the hell that would come to her after they finished supper and reluctantly began having dinner. It would be nice if someone could kill all of these bastards and save the two of them. Was what she thought daily, but her wish was never fulfilled. Soon, even after supper was all prepared and in the midst of eating, they still had to be wary and cautious. She was very uneasy of when the wind magician Mina might explode, especially with her current sour expression. Just like she had expected, she spat out the food onto the ground and shouted. TCH, fuck. It's so salty. You think you can get married with this? Well. You're not in the situation to even get a groom. Ho ho. Uni. You're right, but aren't they pitiful? Puhaha. How pitiful. If I were them, I'd rather commit suicide than live. That fucking bitch. She continued to swear internally, being forced to listen to Mina's rant. There was never a time when she overlooked something. Of course she was scared, but even she wouldn't touch her this time due to tonight's task. Whether she should be happy or sad, she couldn't really figure it out. Even though they were of the same gender, for the clan women to not understand their situation, to quietly watch and look down on them like thorns that were a nuisance in their eyes. These inhumane bastards. Their laughter continued to resound in the dungeon. Hannah and Ahian were totally alienated from the party. While they were slowly finishing up supper, it was then. Prepare for battle. It's the undead. With the party's archer speaking, everyone began to rise in the midst of supper. Hannah, hearing the cry that a battle was about to transpire, quickly grabbed Ahian's hand and began to withdraw from the spot. If a battle were to happen, they would not protect them. Even though they say that they were the clan's wealth, they were just consumables. She had to protect both herself and Ahian. They definitely had to enter inside the formation that the warriors had created. Uni. What are you dazing for? Hurry up and run. Hurry. Yes. Yes. Hannah ran together with Ahian as she looked back. The monsters were larger than the undead that they had first encountered. There were many undead warriors that surrounded a tall undead with an axe on hand. Thankfully, there were none that could attack from range. Although there were not as many, from the previous battle, she realized that this wasn't some easy dungeon. Especially the named monster-looking one that was in front was the most intimidating. The warriors withdrew their weapons and began rushing at it. It was to keep them as far as possible from reaching the party's magician. Hack! Screams rang, but it didn't matter to them. The battle had already started without any concern for them. It was then. Ahian suddenly let go of her hand as she suddenly fell down. There was no mistake that it was an aftereffect from the time when she had left before supper. Ah! Ahian! Ach! Uni! Damn! Shit! The formation was penetrated. The warriors will definitely help them. It wasn't only them that were in danger, but also the magicians and priests. Although the situation was very urgent, in that short time, she waited for the warriors to come help them. Nevertheless, what arrived here were not the warriors, but wind magician Mina's magic. A sudden storm collided against them, as wind blades began to surge out all around. Unfortunately, the range was wide. She definitely couldn't have escaped that area of effect, AoE, attack. No. A large voice could be heard after the resounding eruption. TL afterward. Can I kill them? Pretty please. With cherry on top. Thank you. PR afterward. Psi 101. Let's hope the porters survive. Chapter 55. Porter, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 55. Porter, 2, Captain. How many do you think died? Karuk. As soon as we woke up this morning, we continued through the tomb, and not long after, we were able to discover their traces. A torrent scene of a battle and the scattered remains of an encampment. Just like what Mivi had reported, we were able to see corpses abandoned behind the collapsed undead. There was a girl's body torn to pieces in an unrecognizable state. Although she was of a very small stature, she wasn't able to even close her eyes, as if she found this extremely unfair. Roughly estimating, it appears they were in the midst of dinner, but due to the sudden assault of the undead, they weren't able to properly construct a formation. Of course, as veterans, they were able to defend their position, but it seemed that the porters weren't able to escape. Although luckily one had seemed to have survived, the other however had become like this. Meg started to fly over here and explain. This woman died from magic. That wind magician killed her. I see. I think she was caught in the AoE magic attack along with the other undead. Definitely along with that large undead over there. The human warrior beside it was also killed by that large undead it seems. Looking to the side, one of the warriors had his head detached and broken, which now was sitting beside a rock. There was only one casualty. Although they must have not cared about the porter, they should have come to a conclusion that they had no choice but to sacrifice the warrior. In the end, only 5 of them will survive to clear this dungeon. It would be advantageous for them to have as many people survive as possible till the end, but it was a painful loss losing one of the porters. If the other porter did not survive until the end, I thought that it would be cause for a greatly embarrassing situation on our side. Koreak. As such, after looking at the corpses for quite a while, I looked at Mivi, who was flying across the battle scene explaining. It seems that the humans didn't just fight. Just from hearing the explanation, the green skins began to raise both their hands in agitation. I think that human died here. I think his head is cracked. Do you see any other traces? It seems that there are large amounts of mating done here. After the battle. They sure did a lot. Is that so? From the spot Mivi pointed at, I began to wonder whether they had installed a tent there. Even though there were casualties after, it seems that there was no stopping the men relieving their sexual desires at all. Probably from the smell of humans, Mivi appallingly turned her head back in disgust, as I began to lose myself in thought once again. I have seen countless trash in the 10 years I had lived in the continent, but these guys were really human trash. TCH. I clicked my tongue, in which Black Spear nodded and spoke. If humans are mating so much, then it's a welcoming matter for us. Koreak, as someone of the second generation, from Black Spear's alarming remark, I did not retort back. If it was previously, Black Spear's village would have fallen. Having such useless thoughts, the human party seems to have continued on their march. It was a shame that the items possessed by the dead warrior were all carefully looted clean by the party, but thinking of the items that we could attain in the end, I decided not to think of it too much. And, as we headed further on, we saw more traces of battles. Just like the title of Ancient Warrior's Tomb, there were no traps. However, this dungeon compared to others had even stronger undead. Clear evidence of this was revealed by the large amounts of blood spilt on the ground, making myself wonder how intense the fight was. Fortunately, there was no corpse of the other porter. I looked at Mivi and spoke. Mivi. Yes, Captain. Do you see any tracks of her? Staring at me in a puzzled expression, I began explaining. The other remaining person carrying the large bags. The weakest female among these guys. Aha. You were talking about her. 1 second. It wouldn't be easy to search around so much battle traces to find signs of her, but it seemed that wasn't the case with how MEV replied, causing me to nod. Since she was weaker than the others, there would be a lot of traces of her as well. Soon, after MEV quickly looked around, she gradually declared. I see it. Slowly walking over, she began to point to a spot. She was a bit hurt. There wasn't a serious injury, but it seems that her body wasn't so good. Probably because she made it too much. Just like last time, she ran back once the battle started. But her speed decreased a bit, it seems. After running ahead, she soon touched a pillar and spoke once again. And she hid behind this pillar. Until the battle ended, she hid here. After that, I think she loitered around here after the battle. Until the rest of the team finished up. There's something written here. No, they may be scratches. I'm not sure what it means. From MEV's words, I slowly moved towards her. Hearing that something was written, Heian too followed behind me, and soon we were able to see what was scratched on the pillar with a dagger. I will kill them. I will kill them. What I saw was Korean. I thought I was mistaken, so I looked back at Heian, but she too nodded. And so I thought that maybe things turned out for the better. It seems that the porter was not in her right mind due to her comrade dying. For her to hide what she wrote and be obsessed in staying alive, it seems that there's no need to worry, but in case something might happen before we attack at them, I began to worry. I slowly rolled my head. While I was thinking, our party began trailing behind them at a set distance, and soon, we naturally found countless traces. Captain. This time, over here. She was hiding here. It seems that she was scratching the wall with her dagger the whole time. She must be insane. Was what I thought as I stared at the walls. Although the scratches were very small, I could somewhat estimate what the current mentality of this girl was heading towards. With MEV discovering traces of mating here, it wasn't just the girl. The whole clan was crazy and out of their minds. It was the same for the room where the middle boss was. One of the named monsters, Corrupted Archer, was famous for possessing a very nice bow, but it was much too large for MEV to use from what I remember. As expected, there were a few more dead here, aligning to the level of the middle boss here. There was one that had an arrow penetrated through his shield and chest. I don't think it was the Wind Magician, but there was a female magician that also had an arrow through her body. A total of 3 dead. Yes. The moment they entered the entrance, the boss fired its arrows. That was how the first warrior died. The person to die afterwards was this magician. How interesting. Do you believe the undead can think? I'm not sure, but I have heard rumors that it is indeed possible. Anyhow, the last to die was an archer. The moment the enemy entered its sight, it seems the Corrupted Archer fired his arrows, gifting the warrior, magician and archer an arrow each. What was quite impressive was what was determined to be the clan master's ability. Before his comrades were targeted again, he succeeded in rushing towards it as fast as possible and immobilizing him. The porter as well. Despite the monster being a ranged attacker, she was able to understand the situation and quickly hid her body. Not sure, but it seems that she tried her utmost not be a target by sticking oneself to the walls. What great will! Ha! The will to survive. From MEV's words, I naturally looked at Heian. Embarrassingly, she lowered her head, but this girl was a bit different from Heian in terms of will. In Heian's situation, she just blindly wanted to live, but in the porter's case, I could feel immense hatred. If you need to compare it to someone, it was similar to Solji's. It seems that she was intent on surviving and repaying them back. A lot of time had passed and we had traversed about halfway through the dungeon. No, to be honest, we had gone a bit past halfway considering how the party had discovered the corrupted archer, meaning that we had advanced quite a bit. As we continued discovering traces of battles, both Black Spear and our Blood Dagger clan were gradually becoming more excited, as I thought of how dissatisfied they were being unable to fight for the past few days. The Blood Dagger clan was able to contain themselves as they were used to these kinds of things, but for Black Spear, I could see that he was truly restless. Anyhow, I called for Gark over. It was to explain to him the plan that I had come up with. But of course, what I needed to confirm beforehand was his ability. To be precise, it was an experiment. Gark. Blood. For Blood Dagger. I have a task for you. I began slowly explaining the situation to Gark. Although he was NA.VE, he wasn't stupid. After a while, he nodded and soon spoke. I will reward Blood Dagger's faith. Kariak. I'm counting on you, Gark. Everything is on your shoulders. Whoa. Whoa. Although he wanted to scream, due to the circumstances, he was quietly expressing his joy. The other 3 goblin siblings began looking, as if envious. I already knew of it, but they were probably furious that I were trusting this task to Gark over them. Seeing those cute faces, I stroked their heads, and with a happy expression, they clenched their fists. Gark too came over and pushed his head towards my side. Although I didn't need to, in order for the experiment to succeed, I stroked his head, and soon with a happy face, he began hiding his body. First, I was testing to see if he could avoid our eyes. In a moment, his presence began to disappear. With him walking in the stealth walk skill that he learnt from Green Goblin, soon, it was extremely difficult to find out where he was. Black Spear, who might be in a similar position if not advanced, began shaking his head. I cannot properly feel his presence. Since he is close, I know for now, but if he distances himself a bit more, it will be difficult to grasp where he is. You have a great warrior under you, Blood Dagger. Kariak. Thank you, Black Spear. The experiment was a grand success. Since Gark had to use his mana more efficiently than before, I handed over the stolen longsword I had obtained from Li Yongdan. The longsword that had helped Li Yongdan maintain his unique ability for so long. This would be of great help to Gark on his mission. Soon, understanding my intentions, he appeared and accepted my longsword. For Blood Dagger. He grabbed the longsword as if he was truly honored. It was understandable that I couldn't determine where he was, but what was more alarming was even hearing that Black Spear couldn't determine where he was. Of course his ability will be released once he attacks, but Gark's current ability was more than enough. I nodded, causing Gark to hide his body once again, and soon completely disappeared as he embarked on his mission. For now, the problem was to bring that porter over to us. No, we can have her come to us on her own accord. That's the first priority. Chapter 56. Revenge, 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 56. Revenge, 1, a battle arose once again as she quickly hid behind the group. The battles occurred continuously as they worked themselves deeper into the dungeon. Although her friend and comrade had died, she must live through this. In the past, her obsession for survival wasn't this strong. Rather, she almost wanted to just die than live a life like this. But, she couldn't die. She had no courage to do it herself. If she had the courage to die, she would definitely have run towards the monsters. But, her thoughts now were completely reverse. She had to live. That was something that she knew she had to do. We're penetrating. Block them. Block. Mina, prepare the spell. The spell. She was listening to them talk aloud as she ran. There wasn't much of a problem initially since she was already near the back, but if a battle were to transpire during supper or when they were working on setting camp, then it would be difficult to avoid the battle completely. But, she had to drag her tired body away from the AoE range. Her leg continued to swell, as it was becoming harder for her to endure the pain and move. Thankfully, she was able to part away from the area of range and hide herself as much as possible behind the walls. These bastards wouldn't protect her at all. What she had on was a mere dagger. As such, she monitored the battle from her hiding place. As the undead were attacking her party members. Funny enough, she was praying. Die. Please die. Quajic. A pleasant sound rang as she tightened her grip on her dagger. One of the members was injured, causing the formation to break. Of course, the person that she most wanted to die was the wind magician Mina. It was extremely difficult to contain her rage whenever she saw her face. Regrettably, the person that was hurt was someone else. Fuck. Yungchul. An unbearable person, that wouldn't even be slightly satisfying to her even if he was ripped apart to death. She could still remember of how he had beaten her senseless in the past. She could see him being treated by the priests, as he was taken inside the formation with his shoulder broken. A shame. How joyful it would have been if it was his head that was broken, accompanied by blood, intestines, and having his brain scattered. It would be truly a sight to behold. She subconsciously continued to scratch the ground with her dagger, most likely due to restlessness. It was then Wind Blade. Mina was able to pierce the undead with her wind magic. That bitch. That bitch. She clenched her teeth as she began to glare towards Mina. Strength continued to enter her grip. Can I kill her? If it was now. Would I be able to kill her? If I were to run and stab her with this dagger. It was probably impossible. Although, Yungchul had his shoulder broken, he was still together with the priests inside the safety of the formation. If she were to try and attack Mina with this weak body of hers, she'd probably be flung back, contained, and possibly killed afterwards. Even without Yungchul there, she would probably be shot down by the archers before she could reach her. She was weak. As such, she only had one opportunity. Now was not the time. She closed her eyes and suppressed her killing intent. From closing her eyes, she could see Uni's last moment again in her mind. Uni. Hurry and get up. You want to die here. Ahayan. Run. Ahayan, you have to survive. You must survive. That last moment of Uni pushing her out of range continued to haunt her. For her, to not be able to close her eyes when she died. How unfair it must have been for her to die just like that. Even her corpse was left abandoned on that floor. She should have died. She had foolishly killed her. If she had not tripped. No, if she had not screamed Uni after tripping, staring at her with pitiful eyes to save her, Hannah would have definitely survived. It should have been her that had died and Hannah living on. Unlike her, Uni was a completely different person. She was not someone that became a porter out of debt, nor was she hopeless like her. Compared to her who continued to make mistakes and break stuff, she would complete her tasks perfectly. Even when she alone, there were many instances where she saw Hannah training alone. If she had endured a bit longer, she would have had used the points she gathered to part from this hell-like place and obtain freedom. She knew that it was herself that was the most loathsome one. She will pay the price of her sins. But until then, she must not die. The one and only Uni that was with her in this hell, the one that she loved, she will exact vengeance against those bastards that killed her. That was the greatest reason why she needed to live. I will kill them. Uni. I'll avenge you. No matter what I have to do, I will kill them all. So that Uni can close her eyes in peace, I will avenge you. She realized that she was angrily scratching the ground with her dagger. It was then that she suddenly felt a strange aura around her. Slowly. Slowly. Her dagger moved awkwardly towards one direction. Shocked, she quickly looked around, but there was nothing there. Confused, she began to release her dagger. She began to wonder what was going on. As if a devil had appeared and was about to help her, she was imagining supernatural things. The dagger that was slowly hanging in the air soon pointed her towards a direction opposite of the battle. It was answered. I'm sure he had answered. She slowly began to move her feet. She wasn't exactly sure what was going on, but she followed the dagger. She desired the power for revenge. She wanted to kill those bastards. She had prayed for punishment to be laid upon them for killing Haruni, and it seems her prayer was finally answered. For some odd reason, as she continued to walk, her consciousness became more dim and faint. Was she caught in a trap? She pondered for a second before shaking her head. The dagger in the air was clearly pointing to a specific direction. As if it was waiting for her to come. The dagger continued to move. Uni. Uni. It was as if the dead Hannah was leading her. Calling for Uni internally, she walked for some time. Then, a figure slowly began to form before her. It was dark so she couldn't see well, but if she were to go closer, she could confirm. Soon, Ahian was able to see from that dark place those shining red eyes. Devil. No. Not the devil. The Messiah. My Savior. Savior. The devil that came to rescue her. The Messiah that will give her power to avenge. Ah! Subconsciously, she found herself kneeling as tears flowed down her face. It felt as if she met her resting place with no place to lean to. It was extremely comfortable and pleasant. A nice aroma began seeping out from the place, and embracing that peaceful fragrance, she raised her head towards her Savior. Your name? Beck. Ah Yun. It is Ahian. Savior. I am not a savior. I am just someone sent to help you. Do you want revenge? Against those that killed your comrade? Do you want revenge? That deep thick voice caused Ahian's heart to pound incessantly. Why wouldn't she want revenge? Against those bastards that treated them like pigs, she wanted to rip them apart to death. She willed to pull out their eyes, make them bleed, burst their intestines, and squeeze their brains to death. Ahian nodded her head crazily as if she was insane, and lowered her head to the ground. Even if it costs me my life. Everything I have. The devil nodded his head from Ahian's words. As if he understood, as if he empathized, and as if he was willing to help. Ahian brightly smiled back towards the Savior. The Savior once again looked back at Ahian with his red eyes. Gradually, he spoke. When you reach the end, you will obtain what you desire. Quietly. Wait quietly until then. Yes. Yes. Its words had fully grabbed a hold of her consciousness, as she continued to put her forehead down before him. Not hearing anything, she looked up, only to see the Messiah that led her here disappear before her very eyes. Ah! Ahian continued to mutter the words of the Messiah. When you reach the end, you will obtain what you desire. Wait quietly until then. How could she not know what that meant? Her Savior was definitely going to help her. Revenge. The bloody revenge she wanted. At the end of the dungeon. If she were to continue moving, the Savior will definitely come. He will come and brutally kill them, and definitely free Uni from her harbored grudge. In a very long time, Ahian honestly laughed. Ahian walked and began returning to the group. Running quickly, she saw that the battle had ended and the bastards were resting. Of course, she could hear Mina's loud voice penetrating her. She was worried if she had been absent for too long, but it seemed that it hasn't been long since the battle had ended. Where have you come back from? Stupid bitch. I thought you had died. Do you also want to end up dead like your Uni as well? Ah. No. Hee hee. Useless bitch. It should have been you instead of Hannah that had died, but she ended up rescuing you. Sigh. From Mina's words, she laughed and apologized as usual. Taking out the clean cloths from her backpack, she began to diligently wipe the blood and sweat off the warriors' armors and faces. Wiping away the blood on Mina's boots and bringing water to the warriors, they began preparing for dinner. In order for them not to scold her, she continued to find work. Uni was like this. Although she lowered her head, she had completed all her tasks perfectly, no matter how dirty it was. "I'm sorry. Hee hee. Bitch. Look at you moving so quickly. If you were like this previously, how nice would it have been? You're saying it's a relief that you're alive, right?" Quite pitiful for Hannah. At least she was a useful bitch. Yes. Yes. Although she could sense contempt flowing out of the men around her, she didn't respond to them at all. Rather, she was even willing to quickly release their sexual tensions for them. She received all of their heated eyes onto her. She was waiting for everything to end quickly, as she awaited for the dungeon clear. A hyena laughed like a fool once again. Chapter 57. Revenge, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 57. Revenge, 2, posted on November 10, 2017 by Calvis, 2 comments, Captain. Did we succeed with this? Well. Half of it. We had definitely conveyed the message over. While our enemies were fighting, Gark had superbly done his job by leading the woman out of the group, and with Heian's alluring fragrance, we were able to make her enter a hallucinatory state. I never had expected Heian to be able to control her magic to this extent, clearly showing her progression in her skills. Although, I was a bit taken aback with all of the savior talk, she probably made an image out of me as a person to lean on. Not sure what had exactly happened over there, but there was no question that her desire to kill them exists for Rael. It was when I was first saw her writings, why I had thought that she would someday attack her party. Of course, whether the attack will succeed or not is unknown, but it was funny imagining her trying to attack from behind. A crazy attempt in a formation with only priests and magicians. She will send a signal to us using whatever means possible, when she reaches the end of the dungeon. For us to just match her signal and enter was a very favorable situation. Of course, on our side it would be Gark that would receive that signal. Nodding my head, I patted Gark's shoulder as a means of encouragement. Soon, Gark's face became brighter as we increased the distance between them and us. It was due to meeting a hyena, that we were closer than we wanted to be. As we were moving, Black Spear asked me. "Blood Dagger, can you speak the language of the humans?" I had expected this question already, but it wasn't a difficult question. I nodded and replied. "A little bit. Not too much." Black Spear, it is best to learn when you can. I see. For a warrior that has just entered the continent, you have learned a lot. You are a wise warrior. I could feel a look of admiration coming from him. For some reason, I thought that I had misunderstood his eyes to be similar to that of Gark's. It was a look of utmost reverence. Anyhow, we began to move again. With the seed planted, it won't be long before the seed has budded and yields fruit for the harvesting. Watching my subordinates follow the battle traces for the past few days caused my heart to ache. Time was flowing, and the guys were moving faster than before. What was amusing was that there were no longer any casualties. The circumstances were definitely becoming more exciting. The fact that there were just 5 survivors in this dungeon was strange. Of course, one could think that all of them were swept aside by the dungeon master, but despite that, there being only 5 survivors was definitely strange. It might be just a personal thought, but in the original past, I think that a hyena might have attacked them in this last boss room. If I recall the memory in the past, I didn't see the high-level wind magician in the survivor list, I think. I blamed my head for not remembering exactly these details. TCH. You reap what you sow. Perhaps as soon as the boss battle began, there was a high possibility that a hyena had leapt after the wind magician to avenge her comrade. Of course she would have failed, but that sudden time span would have caused the party to be in great danger. Although the dungeon clear was a success, the clan suffered greatly as a result. And that was all due to a porter who they all treated as a pig. Joyfully, I began to move. As such, after some time had passed, I was looking down upon a very large group of undead. Regrettably, there were no casualties in this fight as well. This guy was also categorized among the named monsters as well. It seems that the party was growing and adapting to the dungeon. But it seems that they had rested a day before leaving. They didn't have too much mating here as well. There is no reason for them to be tired. It seems they are anticipating the end of the dungeon as well, and probably used this day to reorganize and equip themselves. If I can recall, it shouldn't be far from here before the dungeon master's room. Seeing the interior of the tomb became more magnificent, even those without knowledge of dungeons would feel it. The end is near. To say it plainly, these grand undead were the last protecting the dungeon master. Raise your weapons. Kariak. It's time for battle. The guys who were stressed out day after day, hearing my command, they were extremely elated. It was the same for Black Spear. I could even see Heian and Mev's eyes glow reddish. The battle starts from now. The fatigue has piled up, and the end has arrived. We couldn't exactly pinpoint the location of the boss, but definitely they were fighting it. Before they started fighting, there was not much left from them. I slowly moved closer. I tried to hold firm and resolute before the battle, but there was a limit to what I can do with the body of a green skin. However, I maintained my fortitude to complete my objective. I looked over to Gark. For Blood Dagger. Gark with his red eyes disappeared, and I could sense his presence becoming vague. First, Gark will arrive there and prevent a Hyen from acting recklessly, while also judging the exact situation for us. The second was to check whether they were fighting the dungeon master or not. And thirdly, we would attack those guys. We killed our breathing and began to approach them. Until the signal comes, we will wait. With Gark's senses, he will definitely know when it is most ideal for us to advance. As time went by, my muscles tingled in anticipation and my breathing became rougher from the thought of seeing blood. Kariak. The beastly sounds continued to emerge from my mouth subconsciously. It was the same for the rest. As such, much time passed. So much so, that it was difficult for me to contain myself. It was then very timely. I began to hear the voice of the first bellowing from the front. For victory. It was no question that we responded to the war cry. Ironically, I was the first one to react to the voice. For victory, victory. For victory only. For Blood Dagger. For Blood Dagger. I ran with my great sword. A green wave filled the dungeon. It has been truly too long since my desire for battle surged like this. I couldn't help but think that we were like the Goth clan. Kwa. Woawea. Girik, the goblins were running wildly in glee with their weapons, as Black Spear was already thinking of throwing his black spear from the excitement. I tried to control my state, but my eyes were red and I could feel the rough breathing escape me. These guys were truly strong. But the Blood Dagger clan will never lose. We never fight a losing battle. For Blood Dagger. Advancing through, the first people we saw were Gark and a Hyen. It seems that Gark was successful in preventing a Hyen from attacking. With my red eyes, I stared at a Hyen. Although I quickly moved by her, I definitely heard her voice. Savior. Savior. Amusing enough, whether I should feel good for being praised like that, or whether it doesn't matter to her if I'm an orc, I couldn't help but be curious. However, I didn't have any spare time to concern myself with that. I couldn't control myself while fighting the enemies before me. Foo. Fuck. Monsters. BL. Black Spear, how come? Orcs. Young Su. Orcs. It definitely seems that rumors of me had yet to spread to Legius. Although, beginners might recognize me, the elites would not know of the weapon merchant at all. Hack. While they turned their focus towards us. The dungeon master, ancient warrior, swung his sword. The ancient warrior's size wasn't that enormous. However, surrounded by the undead soldiers protecting him, while also attacking the party, they could not withdraw their formation. The moment they dispersed their formation, their clan would be totally slaughtered. Despite knowing that we were coming, they could not retreat. I quickly monitored the female magician's state. Not too sure, but it seems she had already casted a grand spell. Seeing the undead soldiers and broken armors that were swept away, I was almost certain. Blocked both from the front and back. There was no place for them to run away. It was then the party leader spoke. Other than the 3 warriors and the priests, the rest of us will concentrate our firepower on the back. I will deal with the dungeon master. Mina, please. Fuck. We have no luck. I get it, so worry about your own. Once again, she began casting. Judging from that, we were weaker than the undead. It seems they wanted to attack us first. Unfortunately, the troll who came with us thought otherwise. Rather, the group that we came with would bring a greater disaster to the enemy magician. Kariak, for victory. With Black Spear holding his black spear, I ran beside him. His slender-looking arms flaunted its muscles in an instant. Worried that she would die because of the attack, I quickly opened my mouth. It was because we had to prepare something else for her. Her life. As if he understand, the spear slashed through the wind as if it was ripping apart the air, as it penetrated through towards that side. Gioeithoi. A bone-chilling tearing sound, as if a ghost was crying, but I didn't have time to spectate the result of that spear's path. The enemies were right in front of my nose. All that I've endured, it was time to be liberated. Victory. For victory only. For victory only. For Blood Dagger. As such, one by one, the Blood Dagger clan began leaping onto the guys. TL afterward Ancient Warrior Boss versus Humans versus Blood Dagger clan. Woot. Comment. Thanks for waiting. I wanted to come back so many times, but was so busy from my course load. Thankfully I have some time now finally to translate, which I love doing. TL note. We'll post 5 for the week, and also release some Dragon Poor chapters once edited. Those chapters were super interesting and fun to translate, so check it out if you like. PR afterward about time. Slice Dice Time. Chapter 58. Revenge, 3, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 58. Revenge, 3, posted on November 10, 2017 by Calvies. For comments, help. Help. Hack. 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 Priest. Priests. Screams could be heard somewhere before we had charged in. The black spear had directly penetrated through the wind magician. Immediately, before we clashed with the enemies, I raised my head and saw her dangling on the ground with the black spear impaling her. If Black Spear had thrown his spear a bit lower, it would have been amusing to see the wind magician be stuck there like a skewer. Just one blow. He had erased the enemy's most powerful magician with that one throw. In a room not too large or small, were 3 groups. The ancient warrior with its undead, the humans, and along with Black Spear were my Blood Dagger clan. It would have been more convenient to have gone in when the human numbers decreased a little, but due to my fear of a Hyen dying, I had to proceed with the plan earlier than expected. To be honest, the greater catalyst was the experience. If it weren't for Black Spear, then I would have not been so bold as to order the attack as early as I did. Both the undead and humans, they will be the footstool to our road to growth. Victory. For victory only. I swung my large greatsword at the warriors in front of me. Sadly, I had lent the sword I had retrieved from Young Don to Gark. So, I was fighting my enemies with just 3 weapons. My attack was blocked, but I wasn't too concerned. The reason is because we were extremely used to these kinds of situations. Although all of us were attacking them like blood-crazed animals, our bodies had already adjusted to the fighting methods we previously learnt. To say it plainly, the ancient warrior and the undead were tankers, while we are the thieves that were aiming for the back line. This is the most used strategy that we have employed alongside our fights with the Goth clan. Plant tile. Instantly, roots emerged from the floor, as Heian was determined to hold them in place with an advanced spell, much stronger than the regular entangle spell that she normally casts. Those tree-size roots had begun to quickly fill the room in at such a short period of time, separating the 2 groups and making it an advantageous landscape for us. Our clan mainly consists of a lot of assassins. These kinds of environment are beneficial for them. No, what was more advantageous was that it forcefully split the human party up. Bang! The warrior's shield had blocked my strike once again. I had expected the shield to be cut in half, but it withstood the strong blow. Roughly estimating, they were on a similar level to that of Young Don. With the man swinging his sword, I quickly hid my body amongst the roots. The guy tried to follow me, however. Heian in the back of the room was controlling the roots as she blocked his vision of sight. Ha! Fucking orc bastards. They weren't in imminent danger as of yet, but they were clearly frustrated. Although he could deflect by blows, the roots in his way was truly becoming a nuisance. Thanks to that, he was isolated from his group. For blood dagger. In that instant, a sword was slicing towards him from the back. Gark had snuck behind him with his unique ability. Shit! What good timing! With the man quickly turning his head and frantically blocking the sword towards the first, I rushed back at him and cut off his arm with my long greatsword. As I had anticipated, my sword had completely sliced off his arm. No, I had completely crushed it. Crack! Hack! That pleasant scream. Although the guy was encircled with holy power, it was only temporary. With the priests having limited visibility, they couldn't focus their healing onto a specific target and was forced to sprinkle holy power onto the whole area. Kariak, I swung my sword once again at the arm that was holding the shield, as Gark simultaneously crushed his head with his sword. Blood spurted from his face. Ugh hi! Quajik! For blood daggerer! The lamentable death accompanied Gark's loud chant. His techniques were quite useful, but since he had spent so much energy here already, it seems he was in an exhausted state. I patted his shoulders and asked. The others. Karuk, he disappeared again in reply. Although he looked tired from the excessive use of his mana, he also was extremely pleased. With that kind of face, there shouldn't be any problems. With Gark disappearing, I quickly began to look around me. I could hear sporadic screams from here and there. Amongst them, I could hear very high-toned goblin noises near me. Girik! Girik! There! There! Wow, this human is really strong. Running towards the source of the sound, I discovered the 3 goblin sisters from the Loyal 5. They were fighting a human together and had him surrounded. Although he was using skills to try and escape from the terrain, the very nimble 3 sisters were blocking all of his attacks. Qua! Raising my voice, I ran towards the guy. It's the captain. Fight with the captain. Let's go. Girik Girik. The goblin sisters approached the man as soon as I closed in. Damn it. These fucking crazy goblins. With me running at him, he tried his best to escape to the other side, but the goblin sister with the shield cut him off. By using whatever means possible, they were shortening the circle and range around him. Since they were circling around him as they drew closer, it was extremely tricky for him to escape. Thankfully, when I swung my great sword at him, he was in a bound state. For victory. Those high-toned voices continued to resonate around me. In response, he swung his sword at me in order to block it, but it was a very welcoming matter for me. Weapon switch. I immediately triggered my unique ability, allowing me to switch to my weapon, breaking longsword as I secured a hold of his sword. Kwang. With a dumbfounded expression, he saw his sword become entangled in mine. And soon, the screams followed. Ahk. While I was holding him at bay, the goblin sister with the hammer began smashing into him. Nice. Nice. With one of his legs broken, his fate was sealed. Before I was able to cut his head off, the goblin with the long sword began thrusting hers into him, as the goblin sister with the shield broke his balance. One blow. One blow. Quadjik. What was waiting for him as he tripped was a hammer. Hack. He might have not died, but he was incapable of battle. His face was completely smashed in and all of his teeth were broken. I spoke to the goblin sisters. Break his arms and legs, and send him to the back. Understood, Captain. He. Hack. They were extremely happy, and enjoyed the battles immensely, so much so that even chills ran down me. Soon, I could hear ripping sounds from their weapons into the man's arms and legs. I ignored the sounds and moved further away. Hopefully, closer to the objective with the largest chunks of experience. Along the way, I was able to see MEV's arrows and black spears riddled randomly across the routes, but each of us were busy enough with our own tasks at hand. Going closer, for some odd reason, I began to feel heat. Specifically, it was the weapon that the ancient warrior was holding. Ancient flame. With the structure of a two-handed medieval flambe from the human world, the sword had a thick coat of flames flaring. Amusing enough, the sword had features of being able to generate heat and ignite flames. Even in the achievement log, there was no mention of how much exactly the sword raised one's stats. Although the item wasn't of the best grade, it was definitely at least of a rare level. No, to be honest, it could be considered at barely being a unique grade. Although it may be of a common element, it was a weapon near unmatched in efficiency of that kind. There was only one simple reason why I could feel this heat. The clan master and the dungeon boss are clashing their swords against one another, and I was near. While I continued to head towards the source, I began to hear voices. Hiya. Ha. How's the situation? HAA. I don't know. Fuck, all these roots have covered up our line of sight. Damn. First, we have to take care of this undead bastard first. Seeing that they were conversing while battling, it seems they had the ancient warrior surrounded. But the named monster lived up to his name as the ancient warrior and wasn't an easy opponent. With that burning heat, I could hear the ancient warrior's sword clashing and exchanging blows. Clang. Clang. Hack. Even the roots in the surroundings were melting due to the intense heat. Although, it may not seem much at first, for those that were facing the ancient warrior, it must be dreadful since that heat was draining away their health. Assuming that they didn't have the time to be concerned of this side, I began to slowly watch them. BNOL.M It was precisely a 3 versus 1 scenario. Quite a neck-in-neck battle. At this rate, even they should realize that the sword of the ancient warrior was wielding is quite dangerous. Even if they were to win this battle, with their current health, they would stand no chance against Black Spear. As if they had read my mind, I began to see a surge of desperation from their attacking movements. Due to their desperation, one of them was sacrificed in the end. Puck. Hack. Accompanying the plunging sound was the ancient flame penetrating one of the guys. Changsu. You fucking bastard. The clan master looked at the guy, as if agitated from seeing his comrade stabbed through, rushed at ancient warrior aiming for his arm with his sword bent. Anyone could see that it was an alien movement. The ancient warrior, realizing that the human was aiming for its arm, tried to withdraw his sword, but the clan master's sword continued to trail it. Unique ability. The sword had enormous mana surrounding it. Not sure what the ability was exactly, but it felt like the sword's speed had increased drastically. It wasn't just that, it was as if the targeting of the arm was allowing the sword to be sucked towards that direction. It seemed like an ability that will allow one's attack to reach its targeted location. Quite similar to the archer's particular guiding arrows. As his sword reached the ancient warrior's arm, its arm began flying in the air shockingly. I began watching the arm flying up in the air. It had let go of ancient flame. This was the most opportune chance. Although the clan master was reaching for the sword with a bright face, of course I was much faster at intercepting weapons. I raised my body reflexively and rushed towards them. Afterward I LOL'd after seeing the clan master getting trolled like that. Looks like that weapon switch came in quite handy. Comment. Thanks for waiting. I wanted to come back so many times, but was so busy from my course load. Thankfully I have some time now finally to translate, which I love doing. Note. We'll post 5 for the week, and also release some Dragon Poor chapters once edited. Those chapters were super interesting and fun to translate, so check it out if you like. Afterward PR. A Thief in the Night. Weapon Switch. Chapter 59. Revenge, 4, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 59. Revenge, 4, posted on November 10, 2017 by Calvies, for comments, fuck. With a monster suddenly appearing from the shadows, one of them screamed. The ancient warrior had his arm cut off, but it was still a very delicate situation. The undead can't feel any pain. Especially, with a named monster of that kind, until its whole body was crushed, it would continue to attack. Seeing the guy breathing heavily from the seared pain of fire, a heavy wound the ancient warrior caused by stabbing him through just prior. I slashed off his head as I passed by. Grook. With a strange sound, a blood fountain began sprouting from his neck area, but I had no time to enjoy the view. While the remaining guy was busy fighting off the ancient warrior, the clan master, despite knowing that I was here, was stupidly reaching out to the ancient flame. Retarded bastard. Thanks. I quickly reacted and threw a dagger towards him to buy me time. He deflected my dagger away, but thanks to that, my distance to the ancient flame was shortened. But, he was still closer to it than I was. Reaching out as quick as he could, he extended his arm for the sword. Simultaneously, I activated weapon switch. All the muscles in my body began moving in an instant. Before I could realize it, my weapon-breaking longsword and the ancient flame had traded places. I have it. Although his voice rang out, what he was holding was the longsword I originally possessed, with the ancient flame now in my hands. That intense heat that I could feel had dispersed in an instant, as I could feel the heat becoming extremely comfortable around me. The ancient flame was withholding itself from spreading the heat in all directions. The guy was holding the sword dumbfoundedly. It was a situation where laughter was inevitable. Kariwiak. This fucking bastard. At that moment, MEV's arrows began raining down on him. It seems that she had come to check on the situation, since it had somewhat settled down on her end. The clan master was blocking the arrows with his original sword. If he were to be pierced by the arrows, then he wouldn't be in the optimal state to face me. He had exerted too much. Currently, the guy was in a state of complete exhaustion. That last attack on the ancient warrior had also caused a great deal of strain upon himself, as he began retreating quickly. And then the voice I was happily longing for started to talk in me. Quest complete. Quest, collect weapons. Named monster, one called Weapon Merchant by the humans. Now, you can really become a weapon collector. Find a weapon that will accompany you on your first step. 1/1, impressive. With your despicable method, you have obtained a weapon that met the condition. I praise your despicableness. You have successfully completed the quest. The quest reward is a rank up. Please select from the following for evolution. 1. Ancient Intermediate Orc Gladiator. Reward: the hidden weapons in the item shop are released. Available only once. Please use it carefully. There was only one I could evolve to. It seems I was lacking the experience to evolve or change races to another class or species. I quickly selected the Intermediate Gladiator. Other than the armor on my shoulders, it seems that nothing else was changed. However, the strength that was circulating my body was proof that I had grown a bit more. And Ancient Flame, L.C, an ancient weapon equipped with a blade of flames, the sword that the great desert warrior, Dodrak, has used his whole lifetime. Although, the flames were initially weak due to a small mana capacity, as it slowly progressed over time, it has evolved so that one can exude heat and flames with one's mana. In addition, the user's fire resistance will increase. Vitality +1, Strength +1, I couldn't but be in elation from the features. With just the +1 in vitality and strength, I could feel a new source of power flow into my body. I want to test it out. Although there is a gap between us in levels, he was definitely in an exhausted state. On the other hand, I had just evolved and had obtained a new sword. With a flabbergasted expression, he was deflecting the arrows away as he rushed towards me as I approach him. You thieving bastard! Injecting mana into the sword, heat and flames began rising up as his face began to darken. Especially with the lack of moisture, having to contend against that weapon again must be giving him chills. At that time, a scream could be heard from behind. Hack! Young Su! Young Su! I could see the remaining warrior's body ripped to shreds by the one-arm ancient warrior. Kariak, with his arm and leg ripped off, the other guy was struggling to the back. If he doesn't receive the holy power of the priests, it was definitely a lethal wound. Seeing that, I noticed that the clan master began to sweat. Behind him was the ancient warrior. In front was I. It was obvious which direction to choose. Screaming, he began charging towards my side. It seems that he wasn't disturbed with his comrade being in that state. Apparently, it was wiser to push through my side. Ah! Those eyes full of fear, not knowing when he'll die. An expression of extreme anxiety. I could sense his heavy breathing from here. Having become more sensitive to my surrounding, my eyes were able to capture his perspiration dripping down from his chin. Qua. The fear of death, expressions of anxiety, and those wild emotions. I will win. Half assured of victory, I swung down Ancient Flame. Instantly, flames and heat burst from the sword as I could feel a searing noise accompany the blade. I could also feel the hot heat around me. Bang! I pushed off the ground into a great leap. Thanks to that, there was a bowl-shaped dent in the ground. Rubbles of stone began striking at my lower body, but I did not care. The guy that was swinging his sword up towards me. I recalled the unique ability of his from before. The sword that could track its target. As expected, his sword interestingly began to move again. It seems that it wasn't bothered by the heat and flames as it was being sucked towards me. It was an ability that lived up to its title of unique ability. But that was obvious. With that frenzied expression, he was directly aiming for my neck. No, there's no way that's possible. That's definitely strange. It would be right to say that I can see the root of the attack. If he was in his original condition, it might have been an attack I may have not been able to defend. Likewise, if I wasn't in my optimal state. However, I was wielding the Ancient Flame in my hands. Precisely. I blocked it. Clang. Although my hands trembled from the impact, I could not let go of my sword. Qua. After deflecting his sword away. Cut him. CEU, before the tearing sounds of the air, I could hear the searing noises of those excited flames raining down onto him. Since it had a small mana capacity, its range may be small, but it was enough to cover the clan master up. My target was his shoulder. With the thought of slicing him in half, I swung my sword down. Hak! Chaihiak! I could hear his flesh cooked rare inside the fire as his upper body fell off. Qua! Subconsciously, a roar escaped from me. I had become stronger, I had forced him psychologically into a corner, with his health and mana being almost fully exhausted. Even though he was not in his normal state, I had won regardless. Whoa! A deafening cry erupted from within my chest. However, there was no time to spare in celebrating my victory. Since, the ancient warrior was staring down at me with a not so pleased expression. Losing all of his opponents, he began rushing at me. Raising my sword once again, I met him. With his torn right arm gone, there was a normal-looking sword on his left. Despite losing his weapon, that guy was really strong. I could feel the killing intent devour the air around me. It was no wonder dry saliva continued to be swallowed by me. Whether I can win or not, I'm not sure, but first, I must have faith in myself. Rushing ahead, I was able to see MEV's arrows beginning to rain onto it as well. It seemed like déjà vu, just how the other guy allowed for the clan master to try and grab that sword, MEV did the same for my battle. Thanks to her, I was able to revive a bit of my confidence. A named monster that even 3 guys couldn't contain. It'd be strange, if I wasn't curious of his strength. I struck down with the ancient flame. Once again, the flames and heat flared against the guy. Nevertheless, the flames were near useless against him. Not only that, his sword was being swung towards my side as an enormous roar was accompanying it. By raising ancient flame, no my large greatsword, I will block it somehow. Clang! A deafening impact that nearly caused my blood to erupt from my mouth. Strong. No, to be honest, words weren't enough to describe how strong it was. I could finally understand why the humans were rolling along the ground now. Experiencing the blow of the opposition was much more different from watching it from the sidelines. But, I will endure. I may not win, but I will learn. I will do my best to learn how to use this sword, and attempt to steal his techniques to the best of my ability. The ancient warrior once again, swung his sword down. Although it may be just a single swing from one hand, its posture was perfect. I was able to notice that he wasn't able to abandon his old habits. I was of the same. After receiving his blow with my large greatsword, I switched to ancient flame and scratched him. This unique ability not only allows you to switch weapons, but gives you increased strength when you take out your sword. Once when I wield it, and another when I withdraw my sword, I continued to use up my mana. The first attack was able to make him kneel down and bind him from further actions. Not allowing him to counterattack with this two-handed swordsmanship, was exactly the correct usage of this sword, thank you. I can still be stronger. Much, much stronger. Clang. Clang. Our swords continued to collide. Although, I was hopelessly sent flying onto the ground, I continued to stand. Before I was struck, MEV was able to buy time with her arrows, which allowed me to endure through this battle. When I felt that I was getting near my limits, it was then that its sword was rushing to my neck instantaneously. Just then, a black spear pierced his shoulder that was thrown from somewhere. Shai. With an ominous sound, the spear had penetrated through the ancient warrior's shoulder. The second spear punched through its core. Black spear. The third spear had precisely burst through its skull. Guriyak. Despite that, it was still moving. After that, the next spears penetrated its legs, and then its arms, as the ancient warrior slowly stepped back from each impact, step by step. However, it could still move. Displaying that it would still fight, it raised its sword against me. Shameful as it may be, I also raised my sword. And then. It may have been temporary, but I swung ancient flame one last time, against the last warrior of this dungeon that had taught me so much. TL afterward holy, Black Spear is pretty overpowered. He single-handedly took down that ancient warrior. Comment. Last one of the week. Might post some chapters from next week in advance. TL note. We'll post 5 for the week, and also release some Dragon Poor chapters once edited. Those chapters were super interesting and fun to translate, so check it out if you like. Chapter 60. Revenge, 5, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 60. Revenge, 5, the master of this dungeon, ancient warrior, as such met its end like that. I stared at it whilst continuing to hold its sword in his left hand, as it laid unmoving. A fiery cry emerged from within my chest before I realized it myself. Wah wah wah. I'm not sure whether my cry was of ingratitude towards it, but it resonated throughout the whole dungeon, as the Blood Dagger clan began clamoring as well. Victory. For victory only. For Blood Dagger. For Blood Dagger. Seeing that Black Spear helped me out, I could roughly estimate the battle had finally ended, especially with the roots shrinking in size. I could feel the battle against Ancient Warrior lasted much longer than it felt. I slightly raised my two-handed sword Ancient Flame and began inspecting it. If it was as before, such a rare weapon I wouldn't even have dreamt of possessing it. I couldn't help but smile. Kariak soon, Heian's roots completely disappeared as I could see the Blood Dagger clan looking towards me. The humans must have been quite strong, as a few collapsed green skins entered my sight. But, the casualties in scale was not that big. Since compared to other green skins, what was more valued here is survival. But, seeing the reduced number of subordinates, I couldn't help temporarily ponder the outcome. Kariak, for Blood Dagger. Gark, as expected, raised his sword as he screamed. And then, with Black Spear holding one of Ahian's hand, they walked towards me. Seeing Ahian leaning on Black Spear as she stumbled over, funny enough, she held no fear of us. Rather, a very emotional and thankful expression covered her face, causing me to somewhat blush in response. I thanked Black Spear for his help by nodding to him, in which he replied by pounding his chest with his hand. Kariak. Black Spear gradually laid her down in front of me, and soon Ahian looked up at me. Thank you. Thank you. Savior. I did not say anything. Rather, I began directing the other green skins with my hand signals. Understanding my orders, the subordinates began bringing over the surviving humans one by one, 3 in total. Hack. One of the humans was the one without arms or legs carried over by the Goblin Sisters. The others was the clan master with only his upper body. From half of one shoulder down to where his legs were missing. Ugh. Ugh. Ah. Full of pain and heavy breathing, the 3 humans were also placed in front of me. The highlight of the show was the Wind Magician with Black Spear's spear impaled in her. Gark pulled out the spear, causing a high-toned scream to fill the dungeon master's room. Hack. Hack. Not sure what was going on, but all of their faces were filled with fear and confusion. Ahian, seeing this, began looking at me baffled. Saw. Savior. To the Ahian that was repeating the same words, I stroked her hair and handed her a dagger. It was because revenge was the most sweetest when performed by oneself, an act I wouldn't dare strip her of. Understanding my intentions, killing intent soon filled her face. The other subordinates, amused, began watching the scene. Slowly rising her body, she first went to the guy without arms or legs. TL note, please be advised. Not for the faint-hearted, skip to ch61. But, I already posted that warning on the table of contents, so, Ahian. Save. Save. A body that wasn't able to resist at all. It seems that she was of the type that saved the best for last, she didn't even bother giving a glimpse to the magician that killed her comrade. You bastard. You bastard. Do you know how much it hurt? Every day. Every day. I knew Ahian's state was abnormal, but when she started trembling, it seemed that his plea did not provoke a bit of sympathy in her at all. With her two hands, she raised the dagger. Slightly clumsy, she was not accustomed to this. It must be that this was her first murder. But, I thought that she would soon adjust. Looking at me, I nodded, as she immediately plunged the dagger down. Ah! Those dirty eyes. As if she knew how to make it most painful, she slowly thrust the dagger down. After plunging the dagger, she would raise it again and plunge it in his other eye. It might be a bit grotesque, but I could not stop her revenge. As if she was crazed, trapped in her own madness, she began to continuously plunge the dagger down. Die. 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 The stabbing sounds continued to resonate. The guy's eyes, ears, and nose were a mess, and then she arrived at the man's sacred vessel. After ripping apart his shorts, she began plunging her dagger onto it. Hack. Hack. Die. Hack. Spare me. Spare me. Please. No. No. Blood continued to burst onto her face, but she was undisturbed by it. Rather, as if she was enjoying it until his whole body was devastated. Ah. Ugh. Ah. He must resent his own vitality very much. But, after Ahian cut open his stomach and grabbing a hold of his intestines, even those sounds couldn't be heard. Ugh. Ah. Those sounds accompanied the body as it wasn't too far from being a corpse. The surviving humans were ghastly pale from the horrifying sight. Especially the wind magician's expression, it was one worth noting. The realization of how much she was at fault. She was truly worried. Why Ahian wasn't attacked by these monsters? Why the monsters were aiding Ahian? She may be curious, but was too overcome by fear of the bloody unforgiving scene unfolding before her, as I thought looking at her eyes. Confirming that the guy had finally died, she brought her face close to his bloody battered corpse before moving on to the next person. The next target was the clan master. With only his upper body, he slowly opened his mouth to Ahian. Ah. Ahian, don't be like this. Our relationship was good. Right. Don't you remember how good I treated Hannah when she was alive? Emimchim. Fucking dog. Ha. Ahian. Just in case he had the strength to resist, the three goblin sisters were pinning him down. He did try to resist, although with his dying body, it was impossible to escape. Ahian continued to mutter as she rode on top of him. With her small body, she began to mutter in a low voice. Do you know what Uni always said? She wanted to kill you. Every day. She said it every single day. To me. It would be nice if Uni was here as well. Ugh. Ah. Ahian slowly raised her dagger. As if knowing his fate. Ahian did not allow him to do so as she yelled at him. Open your eyes. From that voice, he reflexively opened his eyes, which was then met with very sharp and pointy dagger. Puck, ahk. Ahk. Although he tried to stop it with his other remaining arm, however, the goblin sisters restricted said arm from doing so. With him being tightly bound, he wasn't able to move. Die. Die. Arm, leg, chest, and even inside the mouth, she cut off his tongue. It was a scene so grotesque that it would cause ordinary humans to faint from the scene. It must be tiring, but despite that, she continued to plunge the dagger down. Whenever those bloody sounds were heard, she continued to mutter. Dirty hands. Dirty mouth. Dirty eyes. After crazily plunging it down, she began to rise. Funny enough, she extended her hand to the goblin sister with the hammer, who looked at me completely baffled. Realizing what she wanted, with a Girik, she handed over her hammer. Since a Haiyan lacked the strength, she probably wouldn't be able to hold it up properly, but she somehow managed to lift it. And then after the hammer was raised to the sky, she swung it down onto the clan master's sacred vessel, pulverizing the groin area. EUB. With her eyes wide open, she continued to pummel it down onto his groin. After completely destroying it, she didn't stop there. She started to hammer down onto his arms and legs. As the life energy slowly seeped out of him, Ahaiyan's expression became more gloomy. She didn't want this moment of vengeance to end. She didn't want this sweet moment to come to an abrupt end. In the end, despite avoiding his critical points and burnt flesh from pouring out blood, he spat out blood and died on the spot. The last remaining human was the Mina, the wind magician. With a worried expression, she trembled as she continued to scream. "Fucking bitch. Fucking bitch. You can't even appreciate the grace of us raising you up. Is this how you backstab us? You can't even appreciate being fed and given a place to sleep, bitch." Ahaiyan didn't reply. Rather, she glared at the last survivor straight into her eyes. "You shouldn't be like this to us. Right?" Despite being near death, it was quite fascinating for her to talk gibberish like that. It seems, she has not fully realized what her situation was at the moment. But, as Ahaiyan covered fully in blood slowly walked over, gradually, the magician began to sparingly talk. "Think again. Ha. If it was the matter with Hannah dying, it couldn't be helped. When you go on an expedition, these kinds of things can happen, alright. After this successful expedition, I was planning on raising you personally. Want to return to the city together. Ha. HM. That monster, can you talk to him?" Despite continuing to talk, there was no response from Ahaiyan. She slowly went on top of the magician and began to raise her dagger. At that point, realizing that she wasn't going to spare her, the magician began to scream. "Foo. CK. Fucking bitch. A fucking bitch that doesn't even recognize grace. Dirty bitch. You're going to side with the monsters. Fuck. Fucking bitch. He's not a monster. He's the savior. TL afterward God that was so violent and brutal. At least twice as more than the scene in Solji." Comment. For those wondering how to check my status, you can check the site's Discord and ask in general chat. Anyhow, thanks for all that were patient. I appreciate the love and support. It's why I shortened my hiatus. TL note. New week, and new chapters. It's either 3 or 5 releases for this week, but I'll try and get it to 5, hoping these papers won't take as long.